Hi everyone, so this is day 6 lecture about aging and ageism. So I hope you are having a great Saturday. So I know, yeah, it's very hard to take the class in the Saturday, but it's the university policy of the summer session have the all days of the class of the 3 weeks. So let's take a good time and finish early and enjoy the remainder of the Saturday and the Sunday. So if we don't die young age, we get older day by day and year by year. So aging is kind of issue we need to face if we live in here. So we will check the background of, or the basis of the aging and issues of aging, and try to see what are the explanations of those social problems related with the aging issues. Senior citizens, we call like older people or elderly in the US, are generally about on the range of the 66 through 80s or the older, because we say that 65 or older are some like elderly, but the definition is not clearly defined, so we need to choose the definition, or we need to state what we call elderly as the range of the ages. So we have the increased life expectancy. So average Americans are expected to live around like 79 years in 2015. So it results in the longer period of time in the later part of life. So some decades ago or a long time ago, like 60s was kind of the expected life expectancy. So at that point of time, living longer than like 60 years and treated as like a long period of life. However, in these days, if majority of people around 79 years, 60 years is not that super old age compared with the other age groups. So it's kind of a life expectancy matter. So each society has different level of the life expectancy. So it's kind of social issue or socially constructed issue of the defining some older people or aging issues. So because we live longer, we need to stay at the longer, like a later age time. However, there are the rise of the highly qualified jobs, such as technician jobs or high-tech jobs in the US, but it's like debatable that can elderly acquire new skills, qualifying just like a new jobs or needed for the new jobs. It's very hard to get the new skills or the very new updated skills for the young generation. But if the elderly have like a declined psychological or physical capacities, maybe it's very hard for them to learn the new skills quickly. So it's kind of debatable issue that do we need to have some like elderly as the labor force, or just give the positions to the younger generation. So it's very debatable. But anyway, even though they cannot get some like a new skills or new qualification very quickly, it's not deniable that they have experiences or other valuable values that they can contribute to society. So it's kind of debatable related with the aging issues or the inequality regarded with the aging or ageism in the US. So firstly, we want to check the dimensions of aging. Yeah, as I mentioned before, if we don't die prematurely, we all be old someday. So for the most religious people, they may not want to go to the heaven now or even today or tonight. So most of us want to live into the old age. So so the part of the major studying about the aging and ageism is the social gerontology. So if you want to find some materials more about the aging, you may need to use the keyword as the social gerontology. So we use elderly or older people, the term as the olders, have some like ranges of the 65 or older, but sometimes it's kind of the different definitions based on the condition of the society. So So if majority of people die before 60s, like the African countries, like sub-Sahara countries, maybe older people could be like over 50s or something. So we need to define the elderly or the term as the older or elderly or elders based on the condition of the society. But we will majorly talk about the issues in the US. So we can just perceive that the elderly as 65 or older. So there are multiple dimensions of aging. So chronological age is very simply, very figure of our age. So if we were like 30 years old or 20 years old, 20 is kind of the chronological age. So just a number of years after we born. And biological aging is that like a physical changes slow us down physically or other hormone changes. So psychological aging is like a psychological changes, cognitive changes or mental health changes like that. So chronological age is not clearly the same with the biological or psychological age because even though we define or we set our age based on the years of after born, we could have different psychological or biological or physical ages. So these are some examples. So I found the SNS that the lefty guy. So can you imagine or can you guess the age of the lefty guy? So I found that he's like a photographer, not a celebrity or some like a big celebrity. He's like a photograph model, but he's 51 years old now. And Halle Berry is also very looks young, but she's already 52 years old now. So both of they are looks younger than me. So just using the chronological age may not represent some like exact meanings of the biological or psychological age based on their different level of the physical or social or other social class levels. So social aging refers to like changes in the person's roles. So social aging means that there are changes in the position or relationships and their networks in their organizations. So each individual can have different pace of social aging. So for example, usually if you can see the professors have some tenure and they usually don't have some like a strict age of the retirement, so they can work over 60 when they are over 60 years old or 65 years old or something. So in terms of the social position, their age may not be compatible with the people retired from their job at like 55 years old or something. So aging can be also influenced by the perceptions of the aging culturally. So just I mentioned that some societies have very low life expectancy. The very radical example of that situation is like Somalia or Malawi have very high rate of the AIDS deaths. So they have very low life expectancy because of those AIDS or HIV like the diseases resulting in the death in early age. So if they have life expectancy as 45 in the average, in that case, aged guys or old guys can be 40 or 45, even 50 years old. So perceptions of the aging may not be very same in any society. But in the US, the images connected with the aging is not very positive. So we can ask that when we go outside, do we want to be looked as older, or if you want to look younger? So it's kind of very weird question for you guys because you are generally very young, but we may not want to be looked very old because the looking old means very passive and has like a very low level of the physical ability or declined cognitive ability like that. So we have very negative perceptions on the aged persons in the US. So there are some explanations of aging as disengagement theory, which is closely tied with the functionalism perspective. So I want to remind that functionalism reward some like a very high skills or some like a valuable skills. So like they value their if they can use those people very well, they value them very in the high price. But if they think, I mean, if the society think the positions or the people are not very productive or not very useful, they don't usually want to keep them as the part of the society. So they just want to keep the equilibrium or a stable society and make some like a good functions of the society. So all societies must find some ways in their perspective. The elderly should replace their authority and give the authority to the younger generation, because elderly are no more the productive like before. So they need to give their positions or their authorities to the younger generations who are able to have some more power or skills than them. However, this assumption is not quite appropriate, because inequality or some like inequality of the physical strengths or something, elderly may have some lower qualifications, but elderly in many society can take their previous roles because they have their skills and they have their experiences. And if we just give up them, like disengage them in the job positions in society, we are losing their experience and skills contributed to the society before. However, yeah, it's very hard to say that then who will support them if they lose their income sources. So if we just disengage them from the job places in the society, somebody need to pay for their income or their living expenses. If they are in the job or in the labor forces, they can earn their income to support themselves. But if we just need to disengage them because they are no more needed, then somebody need to pay for their income or living expenses. So who will do that? It's kind of the criticism for the disengagement theory. So activity theory is related to similar interaction, which emphasize on their interactions of the individuals or perceptions in the society. So older people benefit both themselves and the society if they remain very active and perform their previous roles. So that can be like if they have their jobs, I mean, if they can keep their jobs and have many interactions with others, they can have some certain level of the self-esteem or confidence and other aspects of the good well-beings. So these are what we need, have some social interactions of the elderly. But as we saw in many parts of the society, elderly may not be able to maintain their skills or their physical or mental capabilities than compared with their younger generations. So maybe activity theory do overestimate elderly to maintain their level of the activities. So, and also this theory ignore the different level of the barriers of the aging. So somebody can be very old, but they can be very healthy and very smart in that age. But somebody can be very sick in their age by their social class and gender and race and other structural conditions. So for those who earn much money in their younger ages, they can have some like a higher pension or social security, and they can have some like a better skills than the low paid jobs in their whole life. So there are so many variations of the aging, but they may ignore, I mean, the activity theory may ignore that perspective of the aging. So ageism is a sort of the negative views about the aged people. So it is originated from the conflict theory, which is the social burdens or social system has the sources of the inequality. So they focus on the prejudice and discrimination against the elderly. So in the capitalist view, so capitalists are some employers who runs the corporations or other things. So for the capitalists, older workers are devaluated because the employers need to pay very large amount of money because their salary are very high because of their skills and experiences, and their health benefits or other things are very expensive compared with the like a new career youngers. But they are not very productive because of the high-tech skills needed for the new jobs or current jobs, so they are no longer needed or not very productive. But there are very wide inner differences within the elderly. So as I mentioned before, due to their social class and gender and race and other social structures, they can have very different level of the health or in the physical or mental health or other conditions. So it's like seeing more structural discrimination and inner variances within the elderly. However, it's also criticized that it just blames the society, so it may not blame the individual differentiations. And how could we assume that the employers would have like a same philosophy of the capitalist in the bourgeoisie period or the middle age or industrial revolution period? But however, also we can also criticize this criticism that we still have some kind of negative views or discrimination based on the productive level or other values based on their age. So there are some like a complex mixture of the criticisms regarding the ageism and the conflict theory. So this is a key summary about those three theoretical issues. So disengagement theory is giving the positions to the younger people because the elderly are not very qualified because of their age, and they are no more appropriate for because of their declined physical or mental abilities. And activity theory emphasizes on the being active in that age, I mean in the elderly, but it's kind of positive view that aging process are very crucial, and then their activity are remained in that age. But it's not very clear that how they can keep their level of activity even though they are in the old age. And conflict theory is blaming the system and blaming the structure. So there are so very clear pattern of the age-based prejudice and discrimination, and we need to see some inequalities within the aged persons based on their class or ethnic adequacies. So there are several issues about aging. So life expectancy is the expected years of the people after they are born or something. So in the U.S. it range as the 65 or older as considered age because the U.S. have very high life expectancy. So in the U.S., like at 79 years old is the expected lifespan for the average people. If you see the world life expectancy map, the United States is 78.5 in 2018, according to the World Index and the WHO statistics. So this is blue because I clicked it to show the life expectancy. So like the darker red color means the higher life expectancy. So many developed countries, US such as Canada or many European countries have very high level of the life expectancy, but not blue, it's not blue, so it's not 40. But the sub-Sahara area, such as the African countries and many Asian countries, as India or other East Asian countries and Russia and many other communism countries have very relatively low level of their life expectancy. So within the US, we have very differentiations, and I mean very different level of the life expectancy. So you can see the darker color is a longer life expectancy compared with the very lighter color in the southern area. which represents some like a lower life expectancy. So anyway, even though there are some like variations in life expectancy, we have some highly increased life expectancy from 1960s through in the recent days. So even though there are like a very slight decline, there is very slight decline in the life expectancy within like last several years, but we have some like a very increasing pattern in the life expectancy, but it's like decreasing a little bit in the after 2013 or 2014. So in the next few decades, according to the population projection, we would have like higher life expectancy. So and percentage of the order, so we have that. The parent of the like a grain of America will result in so many social issues because the aging issues. I mean, if we have like a higher proportion of the elderly, we will have to pay more for their health insurances or health services, and some positions will be replaced in. I mean, some positions can be filled with the elderly instead of the younger generations or other immigrants. So the aging agencies or aging level of America will result in so many social issues in the U.S. So inequalities in the life expectancy. So even though averagely is about 78 or 79 years, higher class female whites are more likely to live longer. So they may have a longer life expectancy. In the U.S., the most disadvantaged group in the life expectancy is African American male because they live about 70 years, 8 years less than the average. The average African American man live 11 years less than the average white woman. So this is very big difference and big gap in the life expectancy. So there are biological and it's guiding again, but I cannot move. Sorry about that. But anyway, this is biological and psychological aspects. So there are negative images toward aged and aged people or older people because most of us may not want to be seen as older. There are biological changes in internal organs. So as we get older, our internal organs or the body gets weaker and weaker. So we lose the proportion of the muscles, and we lose our the health condition as the part of the aging process. And there is also the cognitive and psychological change occurred in the later life, the later period of life. So the cognitive abilities and the psychological activities decline as we get older. So these changes are negatively related with our health condition and our abilities. So we have some like a negative declines of the both physical and the psychological or mental functions. So because we live longer time in the elderly period, so we need to have some the concepts of the successful aging, like a healthy elderly and having some good network or connections with other people. So many scholars recommend that the elderly need to have some more involvement in their social networks. So it's better to have the social supports and maintain their self-esteem or confidence or other social well-beings, because it's kind of a good way to satisfy their social needs. So when they have like a daily some like problems in their daily activities, such as preparing the meal or something, if they have some like a better social connections or better social support, they can have some more helps from other people, and attending more religious services, such as going to church or going to the temple or other social and religious institutions, can help their social networks or on their level of the connections into their religious communities. So these are highly recommended for the elderly to keep their successful aging process. And there are so many problems and issues related with the elderly. The dimensions, the demographics of the elderly represent some current level of the aging in the United States. And about 80% of the elderly, which are the 65 and older, are non-Latino Americans, white Americans, which is like compared with their proportion of the 66 of the population. So non-Latino whites are about 66%, but after the elderly, like after 65, about 80% of the Americans are non-Latino whites. So sorry for missing the whites in here. I will fix it later. And thanks to Social Security, Medicare, and pensions, elderly's the poverty rate is lower than the younger generation or the whole population, because it's about 9% for the elderly, but 15% for the whole population. However, they after the retirement, about 16% of the people continue to work. So if they have like a good skills, I mean, if they have some like a great qualifications, such as the graduate degrees or like a law, like a license of the being a lawyer or the medical the doctors, they can work more if they want to. However, some like minorities who cannot afford their life without their family or without their children, they also need to work for their survival. So there are like a social class differentiations in the working condition or their life condition in the elderly period. So physical and mental health declines as we get older. So there are some like a greater change of having physical and mental health problems. So elderly are more likely to have the physical and mental health problems, and because of the disabilities in the mental and physical health, about 66% of elderly need help, at least daily living activities such as preparing a meal or something. Medicare and other medical assistance help them to keep their health, but they also need to spend a large amount of money, because the Medicare just covers some proportion of the other medical bills, so they need to pay some certain amount of money, but it could be very high expenses for them, because they may not have some like a good jobs compared with their younger ages and or the fit for the retirement. There's like a long-term care home, there are some variations in the long-term care as well, because there are some like a very good condition of the long-term care services, such as continuous care retirement community. So they usually offers like above average quality of the recreational facilities and the medical care, so like private rooms and 24 hours medical help like that. But this is very great option who need a medical assistance, but it's very expensive, and Medicare doesn't pay for that. So only the high social class people can afford for the very good services of the continuous care retirement community. So if they are very poor, or if they cannot pay for this kind of good service, they need to enter or join in some very low quality of service. So it's kind of issue of the inequality in their long-term care. And the financial security and the employment. Poverty rate of elderly is very low, but when they have the social security service and the Medicare service. But if they are out of social security service or other pensions or other things, they may be very in poor condition. So women or people of color, I mean the elderly woman and the elderly people of color have a higher rate of poverty in the without the social security, and they have like staying poor, because if they lose their job, they cannot find their job very easily compared with their pre-retirement period. So there is like a big paradox in the social security benefit, because it's kind of pay as you go. So if you pay much in there before retirement, you can have more benefits. I mean, you can have the higher benefits after retirement as the social security. But if you have very low income, and if you cannot pay much for your pension or social security, you can earn less benefits in your elderly. So it's kind of maintaining the persistency of the income inequality in their younger age and in their later life as well. So ageism is kind of negative views about the aged persons based on the discrimination and prejudices. So they have highly proportion of the part-time jobs, and it's very hard to apply the new high-tech jobs because their knowledge or their skills may be very outdated, and some remaining discriminations and are their burdens or their problems in the agent in the workplace. And sometimes if they can earn like below the social security benefits, they don't want to work because even if they just can get more money without doing or something than working for something, it's like a very rational choice to stay at home instead of working. And there are some very high frequencies of the negative jokes, disrespect, and prejudicial comments about the older people, and social isolation and the elderly abuse. So it's kind of the widow who is kind of widowed. So for the elderly woman, they are more likely to live longer than men, and they are typically younger than their husbands. And so women are more likely to live alone if they don't live with their adult children. And it's type of the demographic problem. So in these days, the people in the U.S. So after the baby boom generation period, or in the development period of the U.S., the nuclear family forms are the predominant form of the family. So not just having 2 children or less than 2 children. So old parents, I mean the elderly without their children, may suffer from the more financial burdens or issues because they have no chance to have some support from their children. So there are also the physical, sexual, psychological, emotional abuse or neglect of care in the family. And also they have some like in the political power. So in contrast of the negative images or something, senior citizens are some like a greater proportion of the population. So the politicians want to have their support by designing some policies for them. And the various organizations support the rights and well-being of the elderly, such as AARP and other associations. So there are various political actions designed for the senior citizens, such as increasing the social security benefits or medical aid for the elderly. However, there are many criticisms that those some like policies to attract the senior citizens are very costly. If the United States increase the money for the social security services or other medical benefits for the elderly, the taxes should be paid for that area more, and it would be very costly for the younger generation because younger generation should pay for the burdens. So there are so many debates to keep the quality of life in the extended time in the elderly. So reducing ageism in the helping the elderly to keep their life quality. We need to have some improvements of the social services and programs to help the elderly to keep their life quality. And expansions of the social security and Medicare are needed to help to keep the condition of the health in the elderly. And more flexible hours jobs are very ideal for them because of their health condition or other issues. Maybe working full time may be very hard for them. And equality and equal opportunities should be maintained instead of the ageism, because in the U.S., regardless of the gender nationality, and skin of color and age, they should have some same equal opportunities or other chances, at least defined by the law. So do U.S. elderly experience several social problems, even though they have lower rate of the poverty, but they still have the health problems, a low quality of the medical services provided by nursing home, I mean the cheap nursing homes, and high expenses and elderly abuse. So we need to set some efforts to help older Americans to keep or improve their life of quality, because everyone, we all get older, so this is type of the our destination we need to reach and keep. So thinking about the quality of the life in the elderly and support for the elderly will not be separated issue of us, even though we are very young now. Okay, so thank you for watching my lecture, and submit your quiz and daily writing on time, and let me know if you have other questions. Okay, enjoy your rest of the Saturday. Thank you.